Eritrean Defense Forces and Amara forces also committed crimes against humanity, including murder and other forms of sexual violence and persecution.
Eritrea, Africa's North Korea. On the map of Africa, a small nation sits nestled along the Red Sea coast, a place often shrouded in mystery, Eritrea. This enigmatic country has garnered a chilling nickname of Africa's North Korea. But why is that? Well, the truth lies in the similarities between the two nations, both governed by iron-fisted regimes that enforce strict and, at times, oppressive policies.
Crimes of enslavement, imprisonment, and forced disappearance have been committed against the civilian population since 1991.
In tandem with these similarities are the differences, the unique and often disturbing political, social, and economic realities that define Eritrea. To understand Eritrea's present, we must rewind the clock and revisit its tumultuous past. For decades, the nation was embroiled in a fierce struggle for independence from neighboring Ethiopia. This fight, marked by sacrifice and resilience, ignited in 1961 and spanned over 3 decades, culminating in Eritrea's hard-won independence in 1991. The driving force behind this liberation movement was the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or the EPLF. Composed of Eritrean citizens yearning for self-determination, the EPLF waged a relentless campaign against the Ethiopian regime. Their unwavering commitment ultimately paved the way for a new dawn in 1991, marking the birth of an independent Eritrea. However, the transition to independence wasn't without its challenges. The EPLF, which had spearheaded the fight for freedom, transformed itself into the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, or the PFDJ, assuming the mantle of leadership in a newly formed nation. This shift marked the beginning of a new chapter in Eritrea's history, one that continues to be shaped by the legacy of its struggle for independence and the policies implemented by the ruling party, the PFDJ. Eritrea's economic landscape bears the scars of war, isolation, and a centrally controlled system. The nation grapples with many challenges, hindering its ability to provide for its citizens and hindering its integration into the global economy. Years of conflict with neighboring Ethiopia, coupled with strict government control over key sectors, have severely hampered economic growth. The World Bank estimates that Eritrea's GDP per capita stands at under $1,000, placing it among the world's poorest nations. This figure paints a stark picture of the widespread poverty and limited opportunities faced by many Eritreans. Furthermore, Eritrea's centralized economic model, heavily reliant on state-owned enterprises and government control over resource allocation, has stifled private sector development and innovation. This approach has been met with criticism from international organizations like the International Monetary Fund, which has urged Eritrea to combine market-oriented reforms to stimulate economic growth and create jobs. Comparisons can be drawn to North Korea, which also operates under a centrally planned economy, characterized by isolation and limited foreign investment. Similar to Eritrea, North Korea struggles with widespread poverty and a dependence on foreign aid due to its inability to meet the basic needs of its citizens through domestic production. Eritrea's political landscape is dominated by a single party, the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, or PFDJ. Since the country's independence in 1991, the PFDJ has held a firm grip on power, shaping Eritrea's political trajectory under the leadership of President Isaias Afwerki. Notably, President Afwerki has remained in office continuously since independence, with elections indefinitely postponed. This lack of democratic transition has drawn comparisons to North Korea's unique form of governance, characterized by dynastic rule under the Kim family. Both Eritrea and North Korea exhibit strong centralized power structures, with a single individual wielding significant influence. In Eritrea, President Afwerki holds the positions of head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, concentrating power in his hands. Similarly, North Korea's Kim family dynasty has seen power transferred from father to son, perpetuating a singular lineage's control over the nation. Furthermore, both leaders have cultivated a degree of personality cults. In Eritrea, President Afwerki is often portrayed as a national hero and the sole architect of the country's independence. Images and speeches featuring the president are ubiquitous, fostering a sense of reverence and reinforcing his position of authority. So what happens when ultimate power is given to a single person? Well, you get a nation that's eerily similar to the notorious North Korea. Eritrea's political landscape casts a long shadow over its human rights record. The country faces consistent criticism for widespread human rights violations, encompassing arbitrary arrests, forced conscription, and severe restrictions on freedom of speech and press. One of the most concerning issues is the practice of arbitrary arrest and detention. Human rights organizations have documented numerous cases of individuals being detained without charge or trial, often held incommunicado for months or even years. In 2001, for example, President Afwerki's critics, including prominent journalists and government officials, were arbitrarily detained, raising concerns about the government's intolerance towards difference of opinion. Another major concern is the National Service Program, a mandatory program for all Eritrean citizens aged 18 to 50. Often described as indefinite conscription, the program can extend for years beyond the initial 18-month service period. This forced labor under harsh conditions, coupled with meager pay and limited freedom of movement, has driven many Eritreans to flee the country in search of a better life, contributing to a significant refugee crisis. Furthermore, freedom of expression and access to information are severely curtailed in Eritrea. Independent media outlets are banned, and journalists face constant pressure and intimidation. In 2019, two Eritrean journalists, Dawit Isaak and Sium Tsiheya, entered their 20th year in detention without trial, sparking international outcry for their release.
In some countries in Africa, journalists, they risk their freedom, in some cases their lives, to deliver the truth.
These cases highlight the stifling environment for independent voices and the lack of basic freedoms within the country. Clearly, Eritrea's grip on information resembles an iron fist, mirroring the control North Korea exerts over its media landscape. Independent journalism is virtually non-existent in Eritrea, with the government maintaining a stranglehold on all media outlets.
I recently renewed sanctions on some of the worst abusers, including North Korea and Eritrea.
This absolute control allows for strict censorship and the dissemination of state-sanctioned narratives. Eritrea boasts a dismal press freedom ranking. In the 2023 World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders, Eritrea ranked a concerning 174th out of 180 countries, highlighting the extreme limitations placed on journalists and media freedom. All newspapers, radio stations, and television channels are under the direct control of the Ministry of Information, ensuring every piece of information disseminated aligns with the government's agenda. Furthermore, the Eritrean government actively discourages access to independent information sources. Internet penetration in Eritrea remains abysmally low, hovering around 2%, one of the lowest in the world. According to the UK Government Travel Advisory, internet access is highly restricted in Eritrea, mainly limited to hotels and a small number of internet cafes. There is no 3G in the country. The national telephone networks are often unreliable and may only work for limited periods each day outside Asmara and the larger towns. There have even been unconfirmed reports that phone calls made on the Eritrean mobile network are recorded. This limited access significantly hinders the ability of Eritrean citizens to access diverse viewpoints and connect with the outside world. similar to North Korea's state-controlled media apparatus, which churns out heavily filtered news and propaganda glorifying the regime. Eritrea's media landscape serves as a mouthpiece for the government. News coverage focuses heavily on government initiatives and achievements, painting a rosy picture that often starkly contrasts with the lived experiences of many Eritrean citizens. However, it's important to acknowledge that despite the government's attempts to control the narrative, alternative voices are emerging. Eritrean diaspora communities around the world utilize various channels, including satellite television and online platforms, to share their perspectives and shed light on the realities within Eritrea. Unsurprisingly, Eritrea's international standing is characterized by isolation and strained relations, mirroring to some extent North Korea's confrontational approach to diplomacy. This isolation stems from a complex interplay of factors, including internal policies, regional dynamics, and Eritrea's perceived role in fueling instability in the Horn of Africa. Of course, the key contributor to Eritrea's diplomatic isolation is its strained relationship with its immediate neighbors. The border dispute with Ethiopia, its historical adversary, remains unresolved, hindering regional cooperation and economic integration. In 2002, a bloody border war erupted, claiming tens of thousands of lives and leaving deep scars on both nations. Although a peace deal was signed in 2018, tensions continue to simmer, hindering normalized relations. Furthermore, Eritrea's support for armed opposition groups in neighboring countries, particularly Somalia and Djibouti, has further complicated its international standing. For instance, the United Nations Security Council imposed targeted sanctions on Eritrea in 2009, accusing the country of providing military and financial support to armed groups in Somalia, including the Al-Shabaab militant group. This accusation, strongly denied by Eritrea, has contributed to its image as a destabilizing force in the region. Beyond the immediate neighborhood, Eritrea's relationship with the broader international community remains tense. The country's human rights record, discussed earlier, has been a source of consistent criticism from various human rights organizations and Western nations. In 2011, the UN Human Rights Council established a commission of inquiry to investigate alleged human rights violations in Eritrea, further straining relations with the international community. The United States, the European Union, and several other countries have imposed various sanctions on Eritrea, including asset freezes, travel bans, and arms embargoes. These sanctions, aimed at pressuring the Eritrean government to improve its human rights record and cease support for armed groups, have further restricted Eritrea's access to international financial resources and technology. However, it's crucial to remember that the international community's approach towards Eritrea is not monolithic. Some countries, primarily in Africa, maintain closer ties with Eritrea. Additionally, in recent years, there have been some signs of rapprochement between Eritrea and some Western nations. In 2018, the UN Security Council partially lifted sanctions imposed on Eritrea, acknowledging positive developments in its relations with Ethiopia.
The agreement to lift sanctions on Eritrea recognizes the improvements in regional peace and security and the positive steps Eritrea has taken to meet the demands of the Security Council.
The comparisons drawn between Eritrea and North Korea highlight the potential dangers of authoritarian rule and isolation. These systems can have severe consequences for people's basic rights, economic opportunities, and international standing. For the people of Eritrea, these similarities translate into real-life struggles. They face restricted freedoms, limited economic opportunities, and a complex global environment. Acknowledging these parallels can serve as a catalyst for meaningful engagement. The international community, including African nations, can play a crucial role in promoting positive change in Eritrea. This engagement should be multifaceted, advocating for improved human rights, fostering economic development, and encouraging constructive dialogue with the Eritrean government. The current reality is dark, but change is always possible.